Hey, my name's ShawNshawN. I sell art on ShawNshawN.co and specials on eBay. Today we're going to review Dr. Sleep. So Dr. Sleep is a follow-up novel by Stephen King that follows The Shining, and then basically 30 years later. The time is 2 hours 31 minutes, so a bit long, but The Shining was long, so I guess they felt they needed the same amount of length in the same film. Evan McGregor is Danny Torrance, kind of grown up 30 years later. Rebecca Ferguson is Rose the Hat, kind of this gang of leader of the Nas who eat people with The Shining. Kalai Karan is Abra Stone, this new girl who has also the shining power. And Cliff Curtis is Billy Freeman, the friend of Dan Torrance. So, Danley's grown up. He's kind of traveling around. He's kind of bumming it around. He's an alcoholic. He's kind of trying to escape his past by just drowning out the sensation of The Shining to kind of not dwell on it. And he has these weird, bizarre conversation with the old black guy from the first film. And I guess he's still kind of around as a ghost, which is kind of lame as a plot device, but it is what it is. In the original Shining, he survived, so there's no reason for him to be dead. So to use Kubrick's Shining and then transition to a new film, they kind of had to make him a ghost. So that's why that's there. It kind of feels lame to me, but I mean, it's just they wanted to use Stephen King's material, pretty true to it, without throwing at that guy. So probably King had a lot more influence, and Kubrick's not around, and Kubrick, probably wouldn't shoot this second one anyway. So he's traveling around, he wanders into this town, and he finds this guy, Billy Freeman, who kind of gives him a second chance. He's like, hey, you have any money? He's like, hey, we'll hook you up with a hotel room. And he's like, oh, you don't have to hook me up. And he's like, are you sure? And he's like, no, we'll hook you up. And he takes him to AA meetings and kind of cleans him up. So he sobers up Dan, and he gets him into a new person. So this is a long stretch. I mean, it's fine, but it doesn't really add much to the film. I think it just stretches out the act one a little bit. At the same time, you have this group, the Nas, who's introduced by Rose the Hat, and she has a whole bunch of people, and she either meets people and eats their kind of souls, The Shining. She eats The Shining and kills them, or she converts them. So she converts this one girl to her group, and they're kind of not really dead, but they're not really living, right? And they live hundreds of years as long as they're sucking up the souls of the Shining people. And so they're kind of going around taking out these little kids, and you really don't feel like they're any kind of good, right? Which is good. You always want a great villain. So this is a really dark villain. Girl, Abra Stone, is kind of this other girl with The Shining, and she's very powerful. And then suddenly this Rose the Hat finds out about her and is like, oh, we gotta hunt this girl down. She's super powerful. No one's powerful nowadays. So they're kind of after her, and then the girl finds out and talks to Danny because she's already having a conversation with Danny, and he's like, just ignore them, try to hide your shining. And then the black guy comes back and say, hey, no, you gotta save the girl, do a favor for her. And so he gets her the baseball mitt, so she reads the baseball mitt, and then they kind of start following this group, and then they kind of have a couple showdowns, right? And then in the end, they end up going back to the Overlook Hotel and to have the final showdown. So, looking at this film, I mean, for me, it had a big shoes to fill in the sense that The Shining is one of the really classic horror films that really hasn't been done again. They had one film where I think it was Ready Player One. They used snapshots of The Shining, which is awesome because they don't show it in the marketing. So when you get there, you're like, whoa, what's this? The Overlook. But this one, they play it up like they're going to go to the Overlook. So you're like, okay, now it has to be as cool as Kubrick's Overlook, which you're not going to get. So they kind of shoot themselves in the foot from my aspect, because there's no way they're going to match Kubrick. Kubrick's just a real master, and Kubrick would make actors come down and shoot sometimes 100 takes, right? And he browbeat Wendy, the actor that played Wendy in the original Shining. So she was like browbeaten by Jack Nicholson and the director. They're shouting at her the whole time, and so she comes off like stunning as like this browbeaten woman. And of course, the girl that plays Wendy in this film, they're not going to browbeat her and everything to get her into play. So obviously she comes off, she doesn't have this sunken cheeks. She has dark hair, but that's about it. She looks healthy. She doesn't look like this girl Wendy did in The Shining, where she was very lanky and, just looked very 70s. This girl looks very healthy, kind of 80s. So it's like, it just doesn't look the part that Wendy played. And she doesn't smoke cigarettes anymore, so that doesn't make any sense either. She probably would have smoked, in the 80s. So they're off to a bad start there. Evan McGregor playing Danny as the older is fine. They had the little kid playing Danny, flashbacks to the regular one, which is fine. They needed a little kid that looked like Danny. He plays okay. I mean, it's not going to be great. It's not going to be great, but it's not that noticeable. They have another fill-in for Jack Nicholson, who's supposed to look like Jack Nicholson, who's now with the bartender at the hotel, which doesn't make any sense because we know he all became the caretaker. He didn't become the bartender, so that doesn't make sense as well. I mean, maybe it makes sense, but it doesn't, because Grady in the first one, he actually became a butler, or one of the servers. He wasn't the bartender. The bartender was always this really cool guy. So if they were going to use the original Shining and pull back the original characters, those guys probably would have fell back in the original parts, and they, you know, just didn't. And so that was kind of messed up. And then when they went to the hotel, no one acted as well as the original cast. So just like, why shoot it at the original hotel? Because it's a great first 2 acts, and then the third act's kind of like, you know, it's just Rose against these 2 guys. You know, Danny comes up with the plan to let the demons of the hotel get her. So that's kind of fun, and then he has an axe, so he's trying to kill her the same way Jack Nicholson does. So it's just like, if you go back to the hotel, you have to have a new material, and they just rehash a lot of the old material, and they don't bring in new material. Like, if they would have had an origin story of the hotel, that would have been really cool, like the Indian pass, and these guys were hooked up to the Indians somehow. That would have made more sense, like why they're going to the hotel. But in this case, they're just going there because it's just, they ran out of ideas, you know. It's just really lame, I think. The other thing is, you already know right off the get-go who the bad guys are, who the good guys are. In the original Shining, you don't know if the hotel is possessing Jack or Jack is losing his mind. So Kubrick made this real distinction from Stephen King. Stephen King had it like the hotel's supernatural the whole time and slowly takes over Jack, and that's it, you know, and that's kind of okay. But, you know, Kubrick saw the genius of, you don't know which one's which. Is it the hotel? Is it Jack losing his mind? Jack has the special powers, but he doesn't realize it. So it's this really interesting mix that Kubrick came out, and it really plays out to the very end where he just mentally cracks, right? And in this case, you know the bad guys are going to be bad. You know the hotel bad guys are going to be the hotel bad guys, and I don't know, there's just no surprise here, you know. They don't use jump scares too much because, you know, it's an older, you know, it's based off the 70 film where there weren't jump scares, so there's not many jump scares you can use to make it fit the film per se. Yeah, it just had some issues. Act 3 just didn't land well for me. Music wise, it kind of had some of the same elements of The Shining. The weird thing is, because there are a lot of daylight scenes where they're traveling around in this small town where Danny's hanging out, and they're playing like this dark, mysterious music from the hotel, but there was like a broad daylight. It doesn't make any sense, right? And they tried to capture some of the scenes where driving down Iowa and you get the solemnness of Iowa. I think that was really nice because they could have played the music there and then really played up like how eerie it is driving across the Midwest in the middle of nowhere. There's no one. They could have played that up a little better. Yeah, and then they go to the hotel and it's kind of snowy, but it's not snowy, so you can get up there, which is okay. It is what it is, but it's just, oh man. Yeah, and then, you know, the decoration of the hotel wasn't perfect either. It was kind of off, like the elevators. They set up the elevators, I think, how they set them in the film, but it didn't look exactly right. And they kept having these lame lines like, you don't know where you're standing. And it's like, what the hell is that supposed to mean, you know? Like in the film, The Shining, they never talk about it, but there's certain sequences where Jack stands and it's kind of foreshadowing to what happens in the end of the film. And in this film, they're just kind of repeating like, you know, Danny is in the same scene where his father was with the axe, and it's like, I mean, that's interesting, but it's not interesting. And the typewriter's still there, which doesn't make any sense that the typewriter would even be there. That probably would have been packed up. They board up the hotel. I don't know if that makes any sense. I mean, they buried a murder there before, so why would they reopen per se? I guess that makes sense, but it's like the owners of the hotel would be so much money. I don't know. It just seems like they would have chopped it up and sold it off in pieces or something. So that just doesn't make any sense. Yeah, I think it was okay. It's just they shouldn't have used the hotel. The hotel was just a real big disappointment in the end. It was kind of like you're looking forward to the hotel and they used elements, but it just wasn't as cool as the first one. So yeah, it's just, I think they shouldn't have used the hotel at all. Maybe you're just briefly, or I don't know what, but maybe flashback is fine like they did, but it just seemed like they leaned too much on the first film to make the second film. And the parts where they didn't use The Shining was great because you got a real sense of you didn't know where it was going. And that's what a film needs. You can't know where it's going to go, otherwise there's no suspense, especially in a horror film. So, you know, it's kind of okay. I don't know if I'd recommend it. I don't think it's bad, but I don't think it's great. So that's my take. Hopefully give me a thumbs up. If you want to subscribe, you can subscribe below. And I'll see you in the next movie review. Thanks for watching, guys.